An herb, and yes, that's generally how we pronounce it in the United States, is defined as a plant or a part of a plant that is particularly valued for its medicinal, savory, or aromatic properties. Popular herbs include basil, coriander, and parsley. But there's one particular herb that you most likely tasted this morning because it is by far worldwide the most popular flavor for your morning hygiene routine. Because after all, who doesn't want to start their day minty fresh? And that question is probably a lot older than you might think.
Mint, in many varieties, is found on every continent except Antarctica. The plant grows, adapts, and hybridizes easily, so there is disagreement over how many species there are in the genus Mentha, somewhere between 13 and 30. And owing to its easy cross-pollination, the website Gardening Know-How notes that there are some 7,500 different varieties of mint. Mint has a peculiar characteristic that makes it special, as culinary columnist Claire Dinhut, who goes by Condiment Claire, explains. What makes mint so special is that it is a flavor you can feel. This cooling feeling is due to the menthol compound found in the herb, which activates the cold receptors, TRPM8, in your mouth. The simple kitchen herb can literally trick your brain into thinking your body is cold. This feeling is neither taste nor is it smell. Rather, it is part of the somatosensory system, a network of neurons that perceive temperature, pain, and touch. The fact that mint has a naturally vast range and is easy to cultivate makes it difficult to determine exactly when mint's mentholated manifestations were first identified by humans, but it was likely quite early. Botanist Victoria Pickering explains in a 2020 edition of JSTOR Daily. While today we might associate fresh minty flavor with oral hygiene, a look to the history of mint shows how a plant can hold a much more permanent place in our lives. We've used mint for thousands of years. The whole plant, not just the oil, and for much more than cleaning our teeth. We want mint to clean every part of the body, our mouths, stomachs, skin, even refreshing the brain and comforting the heart. Pickering explains that, for example, one of the oldest surviving medical texts in the world, the ancient Egyptian Ebers Papyrus, dated to 1550 BC, cites mint as a digestive and a tool to soothe flatulence. Condiment Claire writes that dried peppermint has been found in ancient Egyptian pyramids dating to 1000 BC. Food editor Paolo Gavin writes in the magazine The Advocate last January, as ancient Egyptians suffered from poor dental health, they used to make a primitive kind of confection that usually included mint, frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, and honey to help refresh their mouths. This recipe could be described as the first known breath mint. The modern name shows the archaic use of the plant, advice columnist Heloise explained in 2013. In fact, mint is one of history's medicinal and culinary superstars and is at the center of numerous legends. Specifically, the name is derived from the Greek legend. When Persephone, wife of the god Pluto, ruler of the underworld, became jealous that her husband was paying too much attention to the nymph Minth, she turned her into a plant so that everyone would trample her. Pluto tried but was unable to break the spell, but in trying he was able to imbue mint with her sweet smell that became more intense if she was trampled. The legend attests to the Greek appreciation for the herb. Gavin writes, legend has it that although mint lost her physical beauty, she still attracted men to her because of her fragrance and freshness. At that time, mint was thought to be a powerful aphrodisiac and was also said to be a contraceptive, if taken before sex. Although the Greek physician Hippocrates warned men that eating too much mint caused impotence. Alan Toolwade of the American Herbal Products Association explains, however, that the legend can be seen from another light that says something about the nature of the plant. She protected the young nymph from her husband, not only because of her jealousy, but possibly also for solidarity within the female world. Whatever the motivation, this component of the story clearly hints at a plant that escapes death, that is, a plant that is particularly resistant. This is particularly the case of Mentha species, which might grow excessively and become invasive, being almost weeds. There is, however, a question as to exactly when this legend arose, as Toolwade writes. The legend does not appear in any extant archaic sources and first appears in the 1st century AD work by the geographer Strabo. But regardless of the origin of the legend, the use of mint must long predate Strabo. Toolwade continues, going back further in time, the very name of mint in Greek, mintha, is traditionally interpreted as pre-Greek. But mint also has a cultural element, and that ties to another legend, as Eloise explains. The Greeks also gave mint its reputation as the symbol of hospitality. The popular story is that two hungry strangers were walking through a village and were being ignored. Finally, an old couple with the names Philemon and Bacchus offered them food, but first refreshed the table with a swish of mint. Turns out the strangers were the gods Zeus and Hermes in disguise, and they rewarded their host by turning their humble home into a temple. Ancient Greeks and Romans found many uses for mint. Pickering notes that the sweet smell of mint was used in funerary rites and to scent the body. And Eloise writes that Greek athletes rubbed bruised leaves on their skin after bathing to increase strength. In Rome, Pliny advocated that students wear wreaths of mint to sharpen the mind, and senators wore sprigs of the aromatic plant, believing it helped their oratory skills and controlled tempers. Mint was also used in cuisine. A recipe in Lucius Calamaea's 1st century AD work Re Rustica on rural affairs includes a recipe for a salad made of mint, coriander, parsley, and cheese. Mint was also used in many meat sauces, including traditionally with beef tripe, a common source of protein for poorer classes. Because of its bright flavor, mint is still frequently used in meat sauces. But appears most frequently as part of traditional medicine. Pickering writes that in historical times, mint appears as early as the first writings collected under the name of Hippocrates of Cos, between 375 and 350 BC, shortly followed by Theophrastus, circa 371 to 287 BC, respectively the fathers of medicine and botany. Two-Wade writes that Greek physicians such as Galen and Dioscorides taught that mint kept people from vomiting blood. He notes that Pliny recorded that the Greek physician Diocles mixed its seed with anise in the 3rd century BC in a remedy prescribed for the treatment of dropsy and celiac trouble. Dioscorides' 1st century AD work Materia Medica lists many uses for the herb, with various types used for everything from treating earaches and stopping hiccups to treating intestinal worms and rabies. Two-Wade notes that Pliny repeatedly deals with mint in his work Naturalis Historia, suggesting that it was better known and probably also much more used in the Roman world than in the Greek one. Pliny mentions many of the same medicinal applications mentioned by Dioscorides, but also to relieve headache. Moreover, he wrote, its very smell protects the head, so it is reported, against injury from cold or heat, and from thirst. Nor do they suffer from the heat who carry when they are in the sun 2 sprays of pennyroyal behind their ears. Pliny also makes notes on cultivating the herb, as well as opining that it is agreeable for stuffing cushions and pervades the tables with its scent at country banquets. Mint has also been a component in traditional Chinese medicine. A study published in 2019 edition of the journal Plant Genetics notes that a plant of the Mentha genus called Chinese skullcap has been used as a traditional medicine for more than 2,000 years in China. Called Huang Qin, it appears in the 3rd century AD work The Divine Farmer's Materia Medica as treatment of bitter, cold, liver, and lung problems. The ancient remedy has great modern potential, however, as authors note that the bioactivities of the root flavonoids include antibacterial, antiviral, antioxidant, anti-cancer, hepatoprotective, and neuroprotective properties. The website of the Mississippi Archaeology Center of the University of Wisconsin at La Crosse notes that wild mint was also a common remedy in Native American medicine, where it was used by all the nations as an aid in digestion. It was steeped in water for the patient to drink. Sometimes this infusion was used as a beverage, like tea, not alone for its medicinal property, but for its pleasing aromatic flavor. The Menominee made a compound infusion and a poultice applied to the chest for pneumonia. Crushed fresh leaves were applied to relieve local pain. And the Western Australia Museum writes that the wild river mint indigenous to Australia has long been used in Aboriginal culture as a flavorsome bush food, insect repellent, and medicinal herb. Mint was cultivated throughout Europe in the medieval period. Dr. Louis E. Grivetti, professor emeritus at the University of California Davis Nutrition Department, writes on his website Nutritional Geography that throughout the Middle Ages, mint was thought able to cure speech disorders, especially lisp. Additional healing properties attributed to mint included use to heal bites from serpents, sea scorpions, and mad dogs. But at the same time, mint should not be applied to open wounds. Medieval English believed that an infusion of mint would prevent curdling of milk. The website The English Garden notes that apple mint, a local type of mentha species, was preferred by the monks so much so that it was actually known as the monk's herb. It's a very gentle, sweet mint, and it was known to stimulate appetite and assist digestion. It was also used as a stewing herb, which meant that it was scattered on the floors to reduce odors as the sweet smell would rise as people walked across the floors, and conveniently, it also acted as an insect repellent. The interest only grew in the early modern period when, Pickering writes, the entire mint plant was considered useful. Dietaries from the late 1500s suggest that mint juice was effective against poison, and that mint herb encouraged circulation of good blood if eaten raw. The powder of mint was thought to aid in killing worms in the stomach, and when mixed with milk could be used for this purpose even with infants. English medicinal writer Tobias Veneer wrote in his 1620 work Via Recta ad Vitum Longum that spearmint doth greatly comfort the brain and spirits, stir up the senses, especially the memory, and make the heart cheerful. Pickering notes that a 17th century herbal by English astrologer and apothecary Nicholas Culpeper claims the mint plant could be used to treat over 40 different ailments. It was during this period that a particular culinary connection may have been made. The website of New York City's Vincent Meat Market writes that a popular theory is that during the reign of Queen Elizabeth in the early 1500s, the main English export at the time was wool. To discourage her people from eating lamb and diminishing their export, she decreed that people couldn't eat lamb without pairing it with a bitter herb. Her idea was that if people had to eat it with something bitter, they wouldn't want to eat it at all. However, to get around this law, people decided to eat lamb with mint, which was technically a bitter herb but just tasty enough for them to palate. It turns out, they explain, lamb tastes best with aromatic flavors. The pairing was eventually carried to the U.S. by immigrants, who in the early 20th century developed the mint jelly usually served with lamb today. But Vincent notes that the pairing is not just the result of Queen's edict, as our taste buds pick up the flavor of lamb from compounds called branched-chain fatty acids. At the same time, we can link the taste of mint to its branched-chain ketones. Because these flavors are so chemically similar, our brains find them appealing together. Sugar candies, bent into the form of shepherd's hooks, were also invented in the 17th century. The website of candy merchant Always a Treat writes, legend has it that in 1670, the choirmaster at the Cologne Cathedral in Germany gave his young singers sugar sticks to keep them quiet during the long-lived Krisch ceremony. The candy was being made in the United States by the mid-19th century, when peppermint oil may have been added, although the traditional stripes we are used to today were not added until the turn of the 20th century. But Pickering continues, mint started becoming big business in the 1700s. Advertisements for mint oil indicate that the original American colonies were importing the product from Britain, often for medicinal recipes. One use still popular today, for example, began as a medicinal. The website Cocktail Collective writes that the mint julep we now know and love today was born in the southern United States probably in the 18th century. The earliest mentions of it come from a satirical play by Robert Munford, where a drunkard character called Mr. Julep appears. Ah, Mr. Julep, the hero we never know we needed. Even back then, people were prescribing mint juleps for all sorts of things. In 1784, a doctor wrote that he prescribed a mint julep for someone with a sickness at the stomach. Pairing the mint with bourbon became tradition in Kentucky during the 19th century, and juleps are likely a common drink by the time the very first Kentucky Derby was run in 1875, although the connection between the two didn't solidify until the 1930s. Eventually, farmers in New York and New Jersey realized that they could grow mint themselves, especially peppermint and spearmint, which are easily cultivated in moist conditions. Mint became an established market in North America from the 19th century onward. The website of Living Libations, which manufactures and sells essential oils, explains, peppermint cultivation began in the United States in Wayne County, New York, in the early 1800s, becoming a highly lucrative cash crop for several decades. The region was the primary producer of distilled mint and profited immensely from its proximity to the Erie Canal, which facilitated the transport of peppermint oil out to the rest of the world. The trade in peppermint oil became quite lucrative, with entrepreneurs such as Hiram Geiber Hotchkiss of Wayne County, New York, and Albert M. Todd of Kalamazoo, Michigan, building such profitable businesses growing and distilling peppermint oil that they were called peppermint kings. In 1860, Hotchkiss produced about one-third of all peppermint oil distilled in the United States and was earning the astronomical at the time sum of $70,000 annually. In the 1880s, Todd, the peppermint king of Kalamazoo, controlled 10,640 acres, the largest peppermint farm in the world, and was elected to Congress. Living Libations explains that the 19th century marked a significant shift in peppermint's journey from garden apothecary herb to a major agricultural commodity, particularly in the United States. The unique cooling sensation of peppermint led to its widespread popularity in sweets and toothpaste. Altoids were developed in 1780, partly for indigestion relief, and Wrigley's introduced the first mint-flavored chewing gum in 1893. In fact, a surprising number of mint products were originally sold for medicinal purposes. The mixology website The Bar Cabinet writes that creme de menthe, a mint-flavored alcohol usually made from vodka, was first developed by Emile Giffard in 1885, who was a dispensing pharmacist undertaking research on mint and its digestive and refreshment properties. After inventing the clear and refined white mint liqueur, he tested it on customers at the Grand Hotel in Angers, and it was a roaring success. The liquor is used in drinks like grasshoppers and stingers. The oncology website The Cancer Letter writes that the idea of adding menthol to reduce smoking's harshness on the throat came to Lloyd Spud Hughes in the 1920s, after he'd stored his cigarettes in an old tin of menthol crystals that his mother insisted that he inhale for his asthma. These cigarettes were actually marketed as a treatment for colds. The Cancer Letter continues, he patented the process in 1924, and 3 years later the Axton Fisher Tobacco Company acquired the patent and began manufacturing Spud menthol-cooled cigarettes. Using menthol to flavor tobacco is still popular, with a survey in 2020 finding that about 43% of adult smokers reported using menthol cigarettes. Mint continued to be included in new products. The dominance of mint-flavored oral products, for example, began in the early 20th century, as the website of New Orleans dentist Aubrey Bodine, DDS, explains. Mint does have some pro-oral health benefits, as it can stimulate saliva production and has antimicrobial properties. While ancient civilizations experimented with various ingredients, including mint, to create rudimentary tooth-cleaning products, toothpaste as we know it began to take shape in the early 1900s. Pepsodent marketed one of the first commercial toothpastes to use mint as a flavor enhancer. Mint didn't just mask the unpleasant taste of the cleaning ingredients, it introduced something more. It left users with a lingering, clean, cool sensation on their gums and tongue, a feeling that people came to associate with a thorough cleaning. Mint candies are also popular. In 1932, Dutch brothers Michael and Pierre van Melle had an idea for a peppermint-flavored candy that was similar to caramel, and a hard outer shell and a soft, chewy center. Originally produced in the Netherlands, Mentos weren't introduced to the United States and Canada until the 1960s. Today, the brand is sold in over 160 countries. In 1940, York peppermint patties were invented by Henry Kessler of the York Cone Company of York, Pennsylvania. Today, 1.5 billion patties are sold annually. In 1949, the popular candy Junior Mints was invented by James O. Welch Company, based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which also was responsible for creating other candies like Sugar Babies and Charleston Chews. Today, the company produces 15 million of the chocolate-covered candies a day. In 1969, the breath mint industry was forever changed when the Italian company Ferraro introduced the tiny mints sold in little plastic boxes. Originally called Refreshing Mints, they were renamed Tic Tacs in 1970. Billions are made and sold annually. While it isn't clear when mint-flavored ice cream became available, a competition to provide a dessert for Princess Anne's wedding in 1973 led a culinary student named Marilyn Ricketts to combine mint ice cream and chocolate chips for a dessert called Mint Royale, and that is generally credited with popularizing the flavor. And mint has certainly had its place in popular culture. A mint that is just wafer thin leads to a rather dramatic reaction in the 1983 British sketch comedy film Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. And in a 1993 episode of the situation comedy Seinfeld entitled Junior Mint, Kramer's ill-timed, accidentally dropped Junior Mint ends up possibly saving the life of Elaine's ex-boyfriend, Roy.
Today, mint oil is a $500 million business in the United States, which produces about 80% of the world's mint oil, much of that in the Pacific Northwest, where the weather and soil is particularly amenable. The U.S. produces about 3.25 million pounds of mint oil every year, and if that doesn't sound like all that much to you, understand that a typical acre will produce about 14,500 pounds of mint leaves, which will distill down to just 56 pounds of mint oil. Of course, not everybody is a fan of mint. In fact, Condiment Claire says that there are two kinds of people in the world, people who love mint and people who hate it. But as it has been for millennia, mint is still the world standard for freshness and cleanliness, and so it's always good to take the advice of American inspirational writer H. Jackson Brown, Jr., who suggested that if someone offers you a breath mint, accept it. So do you love mint or do you hate it? What is your favorite minty product? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.